today in my discussion, this transition to allow the exchange of ideas. And I am looking forward to the dialogue and hearing your feedback and getting some of the communication going. So a little bit of background on me before I get started. My name is Dr. Abdullah Al Bahrani. I am an associate professor of economics at Northern Kentucky University, where my background is looking at policy evaluation, and I'm interested in the structure of markets and how people behave in those markets. I am also the director for the Center for Economic Education, where we have outreach efforts to engage governments, corporations, and also teachers and education level individuals on how to understand the economy and how to operate within it. Discuss things like personal finance, economics, capitalism, and also the power of entrepreneurship. So today I'm going to talk, my goal is to talk for about 40 minutes. That will leave some room for Q&A. If your questions don't get answered, or if you want to communicate with me, please don't hesitate to reach out to my website. You have my website there on the slide. And then I'm also active on Twitter, and please feel free to connect with me that way. If you'd like to connect via WhatsApp, feel free to do so. It is important for us to continue engaging in dialogue and exchanging ideas, and that's how innovation starts. So with that in mind, let's get started with what our goal is for today. So the first thing that I will communicate is I am extremely optimistic for the future of Oman. And in today's world, you will hear news about lower oil prices to fear, or COVID-19 pandemic that we're facing. But despite that, I think we have a bright future ahead of us. And that bright future is really because these challenges that we're facing provide us with an opportunity to engage our stakeholders so that we are all on the same foundation and we are focused and have a common strategy. So these challenges give us a great opportunity to move forward. And where are we going to move forward to? I am calling it the new Omani economy. And what does the new Omani economy look like? It is an economy that grows from within, right? So this is an economy that is going to rely on what we call in economics the endogenous growth theory. And therefore, innovation is going to be an important aspect of our future. That means we're going to change the way we look at things. We're no longer going to depend on government to be the catalyst for economic growth. We're going to require innovation to be the catalyst for economic growth. So we're going to point at 5 areas, and this is not a comprehensive list. These are the 5 areas that I am passionate about and I think are really important for us to look at initially. I am going to provide a macro view, so we're not going to get really technical about it, but if you wish to get technical, please feel free to reach out and we could continue this conversation. For the individuals working in these arenas, please don't take this as a criticism of your efforts. Rather, I would like you to look at it as support for your initiatives and validation that these are things that we should be working on. So the areas that we're going to focus on today is increasing the economic base, redefining the higher education model, depending on small business, attracting multinational enterprises, and then incentivizing research and protecting intellectual property. I am going to talk about these things from different lenses. I'm going to tap into my background as a student once, as an academic, as an administrator in academia, also as an entrepreneur, but most importantly, the lens that I'm going to look at most through, look at these through the most is as an economist. So first of all, with respect to increasing the economic base, what are we talking about over here? If you look at these numbers, these come to no surprise to any Omani or anybody that's looked at Budget 2020 report. This is before the projections before the oil price collapse. It is evident that we are going to have a deficit this year, and that deficit is going to contribute to increasing debt. The calculus is pretty simple. You either increase revenue, decrease spending, and in a perfect world, you do both of those at the same time. Seems extremely simple to do, but in reality, very difficult. So there's things that I want to bring in to play here. First, we need to be careful with taxation. when we discuss increasing revenue, the first thing that we usually look at is let's introduce new taxes. However, introducing new taxes will change firm and individual behavior, and we have to take that into consideration. So in the short run, we might generate revenue, but firms that are looking to be established in Oman have a lot of substitutes around us. And then with respect to spending cuts, we have strong teams working on figuring out how to cut our spending. I actually think the amount we're spending is in the right place. It's the allocation of what we're spending on that needs to be thought of. So what I'm advocating for here is in the short run and midterm, we need to be focusing on increasing the economic base. And the way we do that is through attracting new businesses, and that should be our method to diversification. The thing that, with respect to allocation of our spending, the concern is 3.5 billion Omani riyals of our spending goes on salaries. And the way I look at it, the government should be in the business of building infrastructure and investment for the future. Salaries are capital cost, and there's no future investment out of it. So what I would like to see is by bringing in new businesses, we pass on some of that wage burden to the corporations, and the government could focus on what it does best, and that's building the infrastructure for future economic growth. So the punchline from this screen is we really need to be careful with taxation. And when it comes to spending, you know, we talk about across the board cuts, and that is an equitable approach. I would actually argue for an efficient approach to spending cuts, and that means we have to employ evidence-based analysis to figure out what to cut as a government we want to invest in, and are we willing to let go of. So that's with respect to increasing the economic base. We're going to spend more time here on redefining the higher education model because I think this is one of the most important parts. It has labor market implication. It has a lot of innovation implications that we need to consider. So there's 4 areas with respect to redefining the higher education model that I want to talk about. First, it's increasing the higher education capacity locally. We need to do a better job of connecting industry and higher education. We need to increase emphasis on research and development at the local level. And then finally, if we do all those 3 things well, we will create a knowledge spillover effect that will spur future innovation endogenously. So why increase local capacity now? First of all, higher education is experiencing a structural change across the world. That's mainly due to COVID-19. We are still debating on what's going to happen in the fall semester, if classes are going to be online or in person. This obviously has implications for the students that we're sending abroad. So, you know, it's an opportunity for us to think about what do we want our future higher education investment to look like. Currently, according to Budget 2020, 17% of our spending is actually on education. That's you know, from K through, from kindergarten all the way to higher education. But to get a better idea of how much money we have available for higher education, we roughly have about 15,000 Omani students studying abroad per year. That's both private and publicly funded. The market valuation of that activity is anywhere between 173 million to 200 million, depending on the location that we're sending these students. And that's just tuition and stipend cost. So this is a large market that we're talking about, and it would be great for us to start thinking about how to reinvest some of that money locally and developing, either extending our current higher education, the capacity of our current higher education institutions, or possibly even introducing more higher education institutions to support research and development. One of the limitations of this proposal is there's a benefit of sending our students abroad, and that's exposure to international markets and diversity of thought. I am one of those individuals that traveled abroad and gained exposure, and now inshallah will is giving back to fund. So there are benefits of that. We don't want to eliminate that. So we have to be conscious as we start to move some of our education locally on how to continue to build that study abroad programs and opening our university to intellectual discussions from across the world, whether it's international students or international academics. But it's something that we're going to have to take into consideration. Connecting industry and higher education. This is a struggle that is faced internationally. It's not just an Omani challenge. And I think it's a little bit more extreme in Oman. And the way I think of this is in education, or higher education has isolated itself from the entire industry. We usually think of education as a place of where you go receive content and understand subject matter, but we're not doing a good job of connecting that education to industry, or therefore the employer, and we see that in an impact with respect to job seekers. So our students, whether they're domestic or international, studying internationally, invest highly in their education. They graduate highly educated and specialize within their areas of understanding. However, they lack the experience. So when they go to the employer, one of the first things that we hear is employers say that they're not job ready. Well, obviously they're not job ready because they haven't invested in that experience. So from an education standpoint, higher education institutions, what we should be thinking about is experiential learning opportunities. How do we bring industry into the classroom? And at Northern Kentucky University, this is something that we're investing heavily on, both experiential learning and internships. So experiential learning, the way it works is we seek industry partners, and the industry partners come to campus, and the students work on solving a real world problem for this industry partner. By the time they graduate, they have something to talk about when they go for an interview, and they have real life experiences, and they've developed a network. Industry also needs education, and we need to build that partnership. There's a lot of expertise that we have in our higher education institutions, and industry is not tapping into that specialties or expertise that is available. So one thing that I would like to see more of is industries reaching out to higher education institutions and challenging them to solve these real world problems that they're facing. We should be looking at each other as partners. Traditional students will start to look different. The idea of somebody graduates from high school and goes into university is the traditional model of students. I think as we start to experience more innovation and more turnover in industry, our traditional students going to change, going to look different. We're going to have individuals that are no longer employed or become structurally unemployed, and we'll start to seek new training or upskilling. This is the place for our higher education institutes to be heavily involved, and the way to do this is to already have developed relationships with employers. So when people are let go or find new paths in life, we're there to support them. That brings us to the new policies with respect to retirement. If somebody's retiring in Oman after 30 years of service, we're talking about anywhere between 50 to 60 years old. These individuals still have working years available to them and could give back to community. We need to figure out how to bring those individuals in the classroom, teach our students about the industry that they were in, and connect them with industry partners. But also, these are people that higher education could look at as opportunities to retrain them and get them ready to do something new and different. So the opportunities to break these silos exist, and we really need to think about taking education from this excluded space and bringing it into the community and a partner with all aspects of community. That brings us to research and development. So we talked about the need to rely on local talent. And by local talent, I do mean the PhDs that we have heavily invested in as a government and as a society. They exist, they are talented, and they're waiting for us to engage them, and industry needs to be seeking them out. And in doing so, as we develop a relationship with professors, they will also engage their students in this research, and therefore students will be developing these stronger skill set that they could take to industry. And to do this, we need to allocate funding for research and development. You know, it's a catch-22. What comes first, the research or the allocation of the funds? I believe we need to invest in it. We need to invest in spurring that research and development engine. And this is a good place for the government to enter by strategically funding new areas of innovation. Across the world at higher education institutions, we're getting calls for funding right now about COVID-19 and how to manage it. Your initial inclination would be to think that, you know, this is medical research, but in fact, there's a lot of research going towards the economics of COVID-19. How is it impacting the structure of families? How is it impacting marketing firms? So there's a lot of research that could be done with those funds that are being allocated right now. So we could start to look at building government and academic partnerships. So one thing that I didn't say in my introduction is for the past year, I've actually been in Dublin, Ireland, working at University College of Dublin as a visiting professor on sabbatical. And I've actually fallen in love with what Dublin has done with respect to many of the things that we're going to talk about here, about research and development, and how government is actually hand in hand with higher education institutions to solve the problems that they're facing as a community and as a country. You see a lot of calls for research from the government, but also, more importantly, joint conferences. So the central bank will reach out to economic departments, for instance, and have joint conferences where they attract more people that way. So as a society, we could start to emphasize the importance of research and development more, and also allocate funding towards it, so that could spur some more innovation. So the knowledge spillover is all of this coming together. And for all of this to come together, we really have to change our view on what universities are. The way I like to look at universities is that universities are community spaces to facilitate the exchange of ideas. So it's a place where anybody could go, it's public grounds where people could engage in thought. Kind of like the situation that we have here right now. I mean, if this were not available, think about how many of these ideas would not go further than me. But you know, we've made it a possibility to exchange these ideas, and it will spur discussion, and then it would lead to innovation and other ways of thinking. So we need to create as many opportunities for ideas to be exchanged. And in doing so, the government will increase innovation and competitiveness in markets. It would be able to align its national growth initiatives, especially with the research that's going out, and base it on evidence-based policy. And they rely on expertise, therefore, that is available at university levels. And that's the beginnings of a knowledge-based economy. At the industry level, the industry now will have access to state-of-the-art research. They're going to be sharing some of that cost with universities, so they're not doing all their own research by themselves. They could rely on universities to do so, depend on that expertise. We develop new training programs, and then there's this access to facilities. If universities are open to the public and space is available, then we could bring the industry in. And if done well, we then will see joint ventures and startups start to develop through this partnership. Universities do not leave empty-handed. They have a link with real businesses. They're bringing real-life examples to their classroom. They're developing sources of funding as they start to work with industry. They're leveraging government funding to do more. They could now start to develop consultancy income by providing these expertise to industry and across the economy. And most importantly, they're developing a space to exchange ideas. So that's my view on higher education. This is not just a challenge for Oman. It's an international challenge. The way education is being produced or human capital is being produced is going to change over the next couple of years. And I would like to see us at the forefront of that innovation. Depending on small business, the idea here is we need to facilitate economic growth through small business development. And to do that, I'm going to tap into an example from the United States. In the United States, 99% of businesses are considered small businesses. 78% of those businesses have no employees at all other than the entrepreneur that started the initiative. And as they grow, they start to hire new people. So 64% of all new jobs created in the United States are created by small businesses. And 52% of these businesses are actually considered home-based businesses. So the question I have is, can we create an economy where Omanis are their own employer? And to do so, to facilitate the small business development, we have to change the way we look at small business and entrepreneurship. We have to assume that a business starts with one person. When we're establishing our laws and our regulation, we have to assume that every business starts with one person initially, and if done well and if facilitated well, will grow on to employ many individuals. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to make starting a new company as simple as possible. So it's a three-step process. The first step is business registration. And in business registration, we just need a name, legal structure, and the ownership information of the company. And the reason we need to do this is because if these costs are extremely high, if we're asking a lot at the business registration portion, there's an incentive to do one of two things. One, to not start a business at all, or two, to start a business and operate in the shadow economy. And businesses that operate in the shadow economy don't have an incentive to grow because you're trying to hide it from regulation and the government. So by making it easy to enter the market, we actually facilitate that process. Now, some businesses require licensing, so there has to be some sort of licensing process, but we have to take into consideration or reevaluate our licensing requirements. What businesses actually require licensing and which ones don't? Which one require capital investments, which one don't? And then we move on to operation. And when we're talking about operation, we have to think about whether every business actually needs a physical presence. Our laws currently with respect to business formation are developed with keeping in mind that for capital intensive and producing goods or our retail businesses. And historically, that's been the case. But as a country, we've invested so much in developing the human capital of our people that our people are experts. They have knowledge, and they're going to go into the service industry. And service industries require less capital intensive, or at times don't require physical space. For instance, if I wanted to start an economic consulting company, all I need is my computer and myself. But if I cannot start a business, then I will not be able to enter the market that way. This also has implication for our creatives in the market. We have a lot of talented individuals in Oman that are artists, musicians, in digital media, and to get started in their business, they do not need a physical space. They don't need any capital to get started other than their computer. However, these are businesses, if developed really well, could grow to employ several dozen people at once. So we have to take inventory of all these rules and regulations that we have with respect to business formation and ask, are these stopping anybody from starting a business, and are they necessary? And I believe small business is our future, and it actually will alleviate some of the issues that we have with respect to employment. It will increase innovation in our economy. It will give people give individuals a sense of ownership in the paths that they pick to pursue. going a little bit larger scale with attracting multinational enterprises. Um, I think attracting M&Es is probably the quickest way to diversify the economy. And here I'm going to tap into my experience at Dublin recently. And we'll talk about the differences of Dublin and what we have available in Oman. But one of the first issues that we need to discuss is when we attract M&Es, M&Es are going to come for whatever the local area has a comparative advantage in. And in Oman, the comparative advantage is our geographic position, our logistic infrastructure. So M&Es coming to Oman will not immediately want to hire local Omanis. They would probably come with their team from wherever their headquarters are and establish a space in Oman. And while this is great, it actually has implications from a social standpoint. The optics of it, of a company coming in and not hiring any Omanis and setting up shop on Omani soil might not be popular. So we really need to figure out how to communicate that. And the way to communicate the benefits of M&Es is to think about the spillover effect. So M&Es, when they enter an economy, are going to create spillover employment, but most importantly, we go back to the spillover of knowledge creation. Additionally, M&Es, when they enter a market, they like to cluster and recruit other firms. So when we talk about M&Es, we usually think of this type of framework where the M&E has an end consumer, has foreign business-to-business interactions, either to consumers or suppliers. And if we look at it this way, then M&Es are not really attractive to us. But there's a whole other ecosystem that is not being included, and that's the knowledge creation ecosystem. When M&Es come, they develop relationships with local businesses and they become consumers, and sometimes that spurs the creation of new businesses. There's going to be a partnership with higher education because the M&Es need experts as well, and also need labor force participants, and those are the students. They're going to develop relationships with local suppliers and might even create new startups to supply them. But ultimately, the benefit of M&Es is the spin-offs of new competitors and new industries that evolve around them. So going back to Dublin, Ireland in 2008 faced, the issues that the rest of the world faced with the Great Recession. It was extremely severe in Ireland, Dublin specifically. But Dublin took this initiative to attract outside business. And they focused on the tech industry. And what they, in the neighborhood that I was living in, within a 1 mile radius, you had Facebook, you had Google, LinkedIn, Indeed, all of these tech software companies that evolved because they were attracted in. But recently, what we've seen in Dublin is growth of financial technology businesses, fintech, but also health technology businesses. And industries are growing across Ireland because of bringing in existing M&Es. And these M&Es now employ a lot of the Irish. So overall, been beneficial. As I said, this is probably the quickest way to diversify the economy is by attracting M&Es. So what do we need? And to discuss this, I'm going to tap into Amazon's HQ2 request for proposal from 2017. Amazon, when they wanted to expand from their Seattle headquarters and find a new headquarters in the United States, sent a request for proposal to all major cities in the United States. And they detailed what they were looking for. The number one requirement was they had to be within a 30-mile radius of a major city. And they defined a major city as a city that has more than 1 million citizens or residents. But most importantly, they wanted a highly educated labor force, and they wanted a labor force that had all distribution of skills. So they needed people at the high end skill distribution and then the low end of skill distribution. They wanted good logistics, and the way they defined good logistics was they needed to be close to a major highway. They needed to be close to an international airport. I think Oman has another benefit, and that's our seaports. Another thing that Oman has a benefit of is space. Land is relatively inexpensive when we're talking about in comparison to other major cities across the world, and is abundant as well. So these are things that we have available to us, and also our population is bilingual and at times trilingual, and that's something that we need to consider as a comparative advantage. But as far as consideration areas that are challenges that we need to think about or keep in mind is labor is relatively expensive in Oman, not at the higher end, but definitely at the low or entry level market. So that's something that we cannot compete with some of our neighboring economies, and we need to consider that. We're attracting new M&Es. Regulation for M&Es is relatively high, and something that we need to think about as we establish. The third item over here is an international issue that we're facing these days, and this is the nationalism movement, and I think it's going to have impact on M&E location. I am proud to be Romani, and the fact that we are a welcoming and hospitable culture and people. We need to be explicit in the way we communicate that in media and to the world that you know, we are welcoming of diversity. It's something that is a big issue around the world, and we could actually attract M&Es by presenting and standing by that characteristic. Telecommunication, we've seen major advances since COVID-19 entered the world. Before that, you know, video conferencing was limited. I am glad to see that telecommunication, video conferencing have become a priority. I hope that it's maintained post COVID-19. I know for me, one benefit is the ability for us to do this, but also it's allowed me to maintain contact with my academic partners in the United States and internationally as well. So businesses are not going to come to Oman if they cannot communicate to their counterparts or their headquarters across the world. Finally, we need to develop intellectual property, and we'll talk about that next. So when we talk about recruiting M&Es, we need to be strategic about it. We need to have a list of M&Es that we're attracting and how we're going to cluster around those, and we're going to grow that cluster. It's as I said, it's the easiest way to grow an economy and diversify it, but we have to be explicit and strategic about that approach. Incentivizing research and protecting intellectual property. This is a tough one. Economic growth requires business innovation, requires new ideas to come in, but it also requires competitive markets, meaning that there's new ideas and you have to protect old ideas. So there's a balance here of how much do you regulate and protect old ideas, but you also have to give them the incentive to innovate. So if I come up with a new idea, I need it to be protected a little bit so I could recoup some of my investment. And you know, there are efforts at the domestic level, the local level, focused on this, and I'm glad to hear about those efforts. One thing that you know, I would recommend is transparency in these the rule of law. It will make it easier for us to identify how to innovate and how to maneuver through these laws. So as we transition from the old economy to the new economy, it's important for us to compare and contrast the economies. The old economy, the way I see it, was government focused. Government was spurring the economic growth. Entrepreneurship was perceived to be risky. And I don't think entrepreneurship will never be risky, but we need to start looking at it a little bit. In the past model, we rewarded stability and security. So that meant if you had an option between a government job and entrepreneurship, society always nudged you towards the stable and secure. And I think that's human nature, but we have to be conscious that that's the culture that we're creating. And in doing so, then what ends up happening is all the innovation that happens in the economy will rely on the government to spur that innovation. In the new economy, the way I see it is it's an economy that embraces a culture of innovation. We perceive entrepreneurship as exciting and rewarding, and then we reward risk and problem solving. In this economy, innovation happens at the individual level. So we've empowered the individual to make the choices that they need to make and take those risks and find new solutions to the problems that they're facing, rather than looking at the government to solve those problems. So in summary, we've talked about 5 areas. As I said, these are macro level. There's a lot in the execution and the details of it and the technical aspect of it. We could get into those if you'd like to offline or in a different form. But before we leave, I want you to know one thing, that I believe that in Oman, we have the talent. The talent exists. It is our role to find the ways to unleash it and allow this economy to innovate, allow the individuals to find their passion and innovation. And this new economy will depend on our ability to encourage individuals to create their own economic prosperity. So I know there's, I looked at the people on this call. They're from across the world. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. There are students on here, and it starts with students. Students, if you're thinking about how to employ or bring innovation into your life, start thinking about how to reach out to industry and develop skill set. We tend to encourage you to focus on your education, which is a good thing. However, your education also requires experiential learning. So start to seek that out. Ask your advisors and your mentors, find mentors to help you make that connection. Parents, encourage your kids to innovate and find their passions. People in industry, this is a great opportunity for you to take stock and inventory of what you have with respect to relationships with higher education. If you don't have any, find a way to connect with higher education and see how you could actually minimize your cost by building those relationships and connections. People in higher education, reach out to industry and government and provide your expertise. And then finally, government. If you're a government employee on here, I highly recommend that we take a look at our stock of regulations and administrative burden and try to evaluate what is necessary burden and what is not necessary. So that's a quick summary of my views. I really appreciate your participation. I know we're going to have an engaging dialogue here in a few minutes. But before we do so, for the people that don't get their questions answered, please feel free to reach out to me via my website, Twitter, or WhatsApp. It's really important for me to connect. It's important for me to help and serve Oman and the Omani economy, and I'm willing to do so in any way. Especially for students out there, if you're looking for mentorship around the academic arena, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you are interested in the PowerPoint slides, if you point your phone camera to this QR code on the screen, it will direct you to my website. And on that website, you'll have the PowerPoint slides and other content that I've written about the Omani economy. Once again, I truly appreciate this opportunity. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for this rich and informative presentation. Please, whoever want to reach the materials or the presentation, as Dr. Abdullah mentioned, you can point your camera to the barcode on the screen so that you can get and save all the content from the presentation. And this is as well the website.
Thank you. Dr. Abdullah, do you hear me?
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Yes, I could hear you.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone has any question for Dr. Abdullah? I just have one point regarding the beginning of the presentation where you have said that total salaries in Oman 3.5 billion riyal.
Yes.
Actually, it is estimated between 6 to 6.5 billion riyal. Are you sure about this number, 3.5?
That is a good point. That is civil services and ministries is 3.5.
Civil service. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
So that is clear. Yeah, thank you. So it's only civil, but total salaries.
It's even higher.
Yeah, it is 6.5 almost. So that's a huge burden on the budget.
It is.
Riham, are you around?
Yes, I'm here, and we have some questions. Mr. Abdullah Al Farsi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. One of the questions that I have is about the labor market dynamics. One of the complaints by the World Economic Forum is about the GCC labor market is about restrictive labor regulations and inadequately educated workforce. And we can see that in Oman, for example, the visa ban on expats across multiple levels because of the unemployment rate. And because of that, the labor market in Oman is not very attractive. But to solve that kind of issue, we have a price floor. We have the minimum wage for Omanis to work in the workforce, but that minimum wage does not extend to the expats. So what do you think about that? Should, for example, the minimum wage should be removed, or should the minimum wage include to expats so that Omanis are equally competitive in the labor market as expats?
Great point. Thank you, first of all, for your participation. If you go to my website with the PowerPoint presentation, there's a link to my labor market report, which is something that I spent a lot of time trying. What is the issue that we're facing? There are frictions in our labor market. Where do they actually exist? Minimum wage is one of the issues that we need to consider. What is the optimal minimum wage? I'm not sure about that number. That's where we need a lot of economic analysis and people studying it on the ground. But my recommendation would not to be to increase the minimum wage for expats to make it in line with the Omani market, because that's going to have implications on businesses, and it's going to increase the cost to do business in Oman. So. I think the biggest issue that we have is not necessarily the minimum wage. It's the ability to hire and let go of Omanis. There's a lot of rigidity in that market where it's a big risk for an employer to hire an Omani. And that's why they're more likely to hire an expat comparing apples to apples, because it's easier if the expat did not work out to let them go. So we need to reevaluate our attachment to a job laws to allow some flexibility. The way I look at it is, if you make it difficult to fire somebody, you're making it difficult to hire somebody. So we just need to evaluate where we want to go with that. And it's a social issue as well. How do you communicate that to society? And it's not easy. It requires communication and a lot of PR to do so. It's not necessarily an economic problem only. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Mr. Khalid. Mr. Khalid.
In Oman, the Sultan Qaboos University.
Mr. Khalid, sorry, can you start again, please, from the beginning, because you are muted.
Okay, are you okay now?
Yes, please.
Yes, could hear you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abdullah. A quick question on the innovation part. In Oman, we have got established university in the name of Sultan Qaboos University. We've got the Research Council just next to it. And then across the road. We've got the industrial estates where a lot of mid-sized industries are operating. So my question is, based on your experience in US and Ireland, how can we fast track that? Because I don't see communication between these three entities happening. They've been there for a number of years, last 30 years. So what is the tipping point we need?
Okay. So first of all, Khalid, thank you for confirming my findings here with respect to the siloed approach to research and development. It starts, I think, first of all, you need to make initiatives on all, from the government standpoint, from higher education, from industry. It has to be, a three-pronged approach. But as far as industry, what do you have available to you? You could nudge research by seeking out the expertise. Obviously, you could fund it. You could fund research, and universities will be glad to pass on some of their expense to you, or be able to monetize some of their expertise. So while it's higher education and say higher education, we need you to provide expertise, industry needs to be asking for that expertise. They need to be vocal about what they need, so education could, the higher education institutions could respond as well. So if you are in industry, my recommendation is to take stock about and look at what problems do you have in-house that you want answers to, and then reach out to the university and tell them, hey, we have these problems and we want some of your experts. And that's our dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. More questions? Another question, Mr. Abdullah Al Farsi.
Yeah, I have a question about M&Es. One of the reasons why companies prefer Ireland compared to other EU countries is because of the low tax rate in Ireland, which is about 12.5% compared to the average of around 20 to 25% across EU. If we compare that to Oman, Oman has currently a corporate tax rate of around 15%. And if you compare that to the UAE, UAE has 0% tax rate for almost most industries. So how do you see that from an economic standpoint?
Yeah, so you are competing with your local geography. We have to ask, why is Oman's corporate tax rate higher than our local neighbors, for instance, and how are we going to compete and attract M&Es that way? So with Ireland, at first, what they did is they actually reduced that corporate tax rate to 5% for targeted M&Es, brought them in, and the population was not happy at first because they were attracting companies during difficult times, and giving them tax breaks. But what it's led to is an innovation boom that now they're making 3 times that back. So we could think about our cost, but we could also think about what our benefit is. And what Oman has available to it, is access to seaports. We've invested a lot of money into our logistic infrastructure. That is honestly one of our biggest comparative advantage, and it's something that we should be talking to the rest of the world about. I see no reason why Amazon should not be in Oman, or any of the logistic companies out there. But we will have to give them considerations. We will have to attract them. And we can't think about it from the short run perspective. We need to think about it 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I hope that answered your question, Abdullah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Umayma Bakar. Hello?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm trying to get in there.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. in the kitchen trying to make iftar. I'm calling you from Rome, Italy. Anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. I wanted to ask you your recommendations for the SMEs and the home-based SMEs. How do you propose to get that information over to our current ministries of commerce and the municipalities, which simply cannot get it through their head that you could run a business from your home, from your phone at this point? I remember in 1995, I got my EIN number in the US over the phone call, because this was in 1995 and we didn't have the internet yet as strong. So within 5 minutes, I had a number that allowed me to have a business. This was over 25 years ago. What can we do here now to make it different? I have tried and tried to go to the Ministry of Commerce, to go to the municipalities. They just don't get it through their head. I don't know what to do. It's paralyzing. And I have access to multinationals that are interested in coming to Oman, but as an individual, they make it very difficult for me to conduct business. That's it.
Well, thank you for joining us from all the way in Rome. It's a pleasure having you, and I appreciate the question. You know, we do have to ask, how do we communicate administrative burdens to government or municipalities? And this requires multiple efforts. Experts need to talk about the consequences of those heavy administrative burdens. SMEs talk about it as well. And I think communication is our strongest asset here, and continued communication. But it requires us to say it over and over. You do not, influence change overnight. And I'm hoping these discussions will continue, and somebody will hear this and it would be implemented. But let's take a step back and think about the role of government here. And the idea is rules, regulations are imposed because sometimes in the form to even out balance or to minimize any unintended consequences. So historically, these rules existed because the markets that we operated in, those rules applied. You needed capital to start a business. You needed a physical space to start a business. But industries have changed. And we need to communicate that the industries have changed, and it takes effort, it takes a community, and I think we're starting to make headway. People are listening. So in other words, I have hope that if we continue talking about it, it will happen.
I think there's an urgency at this point. I really believe so. And I'm very, very happy that they opened up the telecommunications for us to be able to do such a thing, for example. And I wish they would open up that as well. I mean, there's no harm. The thing is they always mention things like, oh, you're going to end up with companies in Dubai that just have a post office or they just have a tag on an office and they have a business license. But this way they're encouraging that to happen more so than if you just give us the license to just be able to do it. And you don't need, it's not a big deal. Do you really need to come and see what art I'm working on every day? Or what, what I'm going to have in my office when I'm going to be doing, as a business consultant. Then I've got another one. I'm sorry, there's another. You hit on so many points. To become a business consultant, you have to have a master's in business consultancy, which I do not know of such one that exists yet. I've mentioned to them I have 25 years experience, but that doesn't seem to make any difference. They want a piece of paper that says that you have, you've worked on it, you've studied it for 2 years. Anyway, that's it.
And that's what I, propose for us to take inventory of all the rules and regulations that we have in place and revisit them and ask, do they still apply in this economy that we have today? So thank you once again for your participation. I appreciate it.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. More questions? Mr. Talal? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Riham, and thank you, Dr. Abdullah. That's great.
Thank you.
And thank you to Sheikh Khalil for hosting that event, and to Majlis Al Khonji. I'm just trying to reflect on one of the points that you kindly mentioned, that coming from a free market society where you are now based on in the United States, where there is continuous hiring and firing, or continuous intake and offtake to the labor market. Reflection on the Oman labor law. In one of the articles that we face difficulties on it, especially in the energy sectors and in oil and gas, which is Article 48, which means that if you are hiring like a group of nationals, and for example, the contract has been expired, the newcomer who will take the contract, he must transfer the previous, and so he can build on the previous national whatever has been exist with the previous companies. And that has been introduced in 2011 after like some of the social pressure that the society has faced. So since 2011, now we are almost in 2020, almost 9 years, we reach a level where we are almost, the market has been saturated with the like specific national power, human power, and they're almost didn't allow for new intake from the universities, or from the educational, or from the vocal training. So it's a dilemma. I see that will grow, and there is more pressure to reflect on it. My question to you, based on what you have seen it and witnessed it in your society, where you are practicing your economic consultancy, what is the best way we can introduce such like hiring and firing system to a regulator who also face the difficulties on easing the social pressure on the society? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. The way I look at it is this is really a communication / education process. We as Omanis, we look at the government as the solution, as hiring, it's as maintaining social order and everything of that sort. So the way I would approach it is we need to introduce in our education system a little bit of economics. What is the role of government? What is the role of entrepreneurship? What's the role of innovation and individual production, if you may? But that doesn't solve your problem with the regulator. The regulator is really looking to maintain status quo over here. And as you said, this rule was introduced because of the 2011 issues. And our labor market, our employees have a perception that a job is a right? So everybody believes that they deserve a job. And I'm not saying that's not necessarily right or wrong, but if everybody believes that they deserve a job, then it's going to be difficult for us to have businesses enter the market. So it really starts with the society perspective. We need to communicate the benefits of a flexible labor market. Now, I'm not arguing to go, completely, make a drastic 180 change overnight. But I really think that there's room for us to liberate the labor market, and it will have gains for everybody, even the people that are unemployed right now. But we have to communicate those benefits. And right now, we're not communicating the benefits of liberalizing the labor market or other markets. Most regulation, as I said, is introduced to protect people. But sometimes it goes too far in protecting people that it hinders entry. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We have another question from Mr. Qais. Mr. Qais?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's not a question. First of all, thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for the insightful presentation. I think it's more a comment, and I'd like to throw it out there and see if you agree with me or not. I think with you've promoted deregulation as a mode for attracting multinationals to the country. But I think there are many countries that are deregulating in the region at this point in time. So it's going to take more than just deregulation. It's more deregulation coupled with incentive schemes that countries can offer to have that comparative advantage and attract multinationals. And I think with Oman, Oman is not as well resourced that it can provide an abundance of incentives across various sectors. It needs to prioritize what sectors it would like to attract. So it can't be the technology hub, the logistic hub, the innovation hub, the food security hub, and provide incentives to attract all those businesses. So to what extent do you think prioritization is key and to attracting multinationals into a country?
Qais, thank you for participating. You're exactly on point. I think our views are aligned here. Deregulation in itself is not going to attract people or MNE or Oman because they're more aware with our local geographic competitors. What we need is a stronger brand recognition of what Oman has to offer. And, you know, I gave the example of Ireland. Ireland did not go into developing all of its sectors at once. They focused on the tech and they try to build an ecosystem around the tech industry. So Oman, we really have to invest in figuring out who we want to attract or what do we want industries we want to invest in and building that infrastructure. That is the role of government, is to build the infrastructure so businesses could thrive on top of that infrastructure. So yes, we need to be strategic. We need to have a list of companies and industries that we're targeting. And we need to have set out the locations that are available to incentivize them to come to. And then the rest of it is marketing and branding. And we need to do a better job in comparison with our neighbors. When I'm, at any international city and I'm watching the news, I will see advertisements for most of our neighbors. I saw one advertisement of Oman when I was in Dublin. I was extremely excited. And that was a couple of months ago. So I think we are starting to go that way, but we have to have a blueprint on where we want to go. We do not have the resources to attract all businesses, and I don't think that's actually strategically the way we should go. So I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Thank you, Abdullah.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have more questions. Mr. Mazen, are you still there? Mr. Mazen, you have any question? Okay, we will go to Mr. Muhammad Al Abri. Mr. Muhammad Al Abri?
Yes, hello.
Yes, please, we
Hello.
can hear you.
Sorry, I was muted for a while. Dr. Abdullah, just wanted to make sure about your idea about linking the industry to the higher education. I come from the higher education sector, and to me, it does seem that that happens in the petroleum industry, where we at SQU get a lot of consultancies from the petroleum industry. But when it comes to other industries, unfortunately, we don't have as much, be it because the sectors themselves are not well developed, or the needs are not very well understood, or maybe there isn't a big hype towards going and doing research in those sectors. How do you think we can encourage companies in the private sector that exists today? I'm not talking about the foreign direct investment. I'm talking about the companies that exist today. How can we encourage them to invest in research, given especially that we don't have a high investment of capital into research nationwide? It's about 0.5% or something like that. So how can we incentivize them to push forward?
Yeah, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. So as far as how do you start to develop that relationship, the way I've done it at Northern Kentucky University is I've gone out to industry. I've actually knocked on doors. I've met with people. I've met with people. I have asked them to come in and talk to my students. These are relationships that need to be built. And no one is going to give you industry secrets overnight to help you advise them. And the other issue is industry doesn't know what's available in higher education. We've been siloed for so long, they don't know the talent that's there. So our professors, our researchers need to be vocal about what they're doing. I love the movement on Twitter with our researchers and academics. But we need to be a little bit more explicit about what we're doing and how we could solve the problems. Unfortunately, I've had conversations with industry, and I've been in meetings, and the response is, we don't want an academic solution. We want a real life solution. So there's this perception that academia is theoretical and it's so far removed that there's no way you could help me. And that's, just due to the fact that they haven't had that exposure. The people that you're talking to have graduated 20, 30, 40 years ago. So you need to tell them what's happening in your classroom today and what you're doing as a researcher. We need to start marketing our researchers as superstars. That's the way I look at it. It might sound funny, but that's really the place where these are the people that we're depending on for ideas, for innovation. So let's treat them that way.
And it's true, because we want to always develop our curricula and inject new materials in them and real life material in them. And without this connection, our students will be so distant from the real world. And actually, we have started at our college to reach out to the industry and bring them even over to our college so that they can see and judge our curriculum and our programs. So that connection have started already, alhamdulillah.
Perfect. Alhamdulillah. And that's the first step. You're taking the first step. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. More questions? We have Jaylina.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for a very, very interesting presentation. My question is regarding the how-to. So you've given a lot of very interesting solutions which involve a number of different stakeholders. And my question is in regard to how and who should manage and coordinate all of this in order to orchestrate a unified outcome.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, and thank you for being here. They say the devil's in the details, right? It's how you actually execute is the problem. One thing that usually comes up is we're always looking for a centralized place to solve these issues. And what ends up happening is then we're asking for the government to come up with a new entity that's going to oversee all of this and support this transition. And what I'm advocating for is, each on the micro level, each one of us starting the steps. Now, there are some rules and regulations that we have to maneuver, and that requires us to talk to the regulators and government. But some of these solutions that we're talking about really start at the firm level. So if you are in higher education, some of the things that we talked about could be employed today. Now, with respect to attracting M&Es, we already have an established entity or entities that are trying to attract M&Es. So that's their responsibility. So, I want to just be transparent here, is the last thing that we need is another centralized area that implements all these 5 items or parts of it. What I would like us to do is walk out of here, each of us, ask, what can we do to spur innovation within our industry and what we control? So if you're in the classroom, how do I bring industry into my classroom? If I'm a researcher, how do I build those relationships? If I'm an SME, what do I need to do? Who do I need to communicate with to start to develop, you know, a more transparent path? So I am advocating for a little bit of personal ownership over here for us to be the catalyst of innovation.
Thank you for that very, very good response. I'm in full agreement with you, and I think we should all take ownership within our respective domains of expertise and within our networks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saleh Al-Shamfari. Mr. Saleh, are you with us?
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah, for very, very informative presentation. Thank you. See you again. Been following your tweets quite long since we met a long time ago. I'm sure your mother, who's in the audience now with us, is very happy to see us all together. But thank you from here to your mother, and we all are proud of you and your work outside Oman, be it in the US, Ireland, or elsewhere. Thank you very much, and I'd love to see you again. Presenting a case study, how we can really bring together academia with industry. I can show you an example that we did together with SQU. Dr. Muhammad here can really support that. The work that we did recently with SQU, I think I share with you this document just to tell you that there is work that has happened between us at Mazoon Dairy and SQU, you know, especially the College of Agriculture and Marine Sciences, where all the products of Mazoon Dairy that you can see in the market today successfully were developed ahead of time at the SQU labs. So that was an example of how we can really, even before launching the product, that we can do something which is really saves us the money. This is the cost of building a full lab, and at the same time, you know, shows an example of how can an industry in Oman that's so new, so juvenile, that can really utilize the facilities available in an academic institution like SQU, and it worked perfectly. All the products that you see today in the market, most of them were developed there, and we are proud of this type of relationship. And I think this can be replicated in other colleges and other universities. Hey, for example, another good example is what Sohar University is doing by providing the services, the molding sort of services provided to all industry to develop their molds. Today, you don't need to go up in Oman to have a mold for your manufacturing. Sohar University today can do a lot of this. And another example I can tell you, you know, there are institutions today that can help us do this. For example, you all should have heard about EJAD. EJAD is a platform where all people from TRC, Research Council, SQU, BDO, thanks to them, Ministry of Oil and Gas, other ministries, more than 60 institutions today have the ability to come together. So today, if you are a member of the platform, which it doesn't cost you much money, you can throw problems to them. They will help you go through your problem, bring experts from all over the world and from local institutions to help you solve your problem. This is just an example of how academia have evolved in Oman, understanding the difficulties that we have with them to bridge the Death Valley that existed long time ago. You know,
yeah.
Myself, I've been in the advisory council for the College of Agriculture and Marine Sciences for the last 10 years, and I see the difficulties there. But today it's happening. I mean, the platform which is existing, IGAD, as I mentioned, and examples that we can do today shows that there is possibilities that we can bridge the gap and bring academia and industry together. So thank you very much. Very elaborative, and I learned a lot this evening from you.
Thank you, Mr. Salah. And I first of all want to applaud you for your innovation and your support of the youth and the talent we have in Oman. I could speak of it personally. You've been very supportive of me, and I really appreciate that. And that's exactly what we need in Oman, is people like yourself that are willing to engage the talent that we have. What I would like to see is more press, more highlighting the things that are happening, because that creates a cascading or copycat effect. People want to emulate what's successful. So if we point out what's working and what we want to see happen, I think that will spur out the innovation. So thank you for doing that. And I hope other people follow your initiatives.
Thank you very much. Mr. Michael Hansen. Mr. Mike.
Thank you, Reham. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. A really excellent presentation. And thank you, Mr. Khalil, for this. So I think this is the highest number of participants we've seen in this series. Dr. Abdullah, like you, I fundamentally believe in we have the right talent here in Oman. And it's the challenge of how to unleash this talent. And why? Because I think for the new Oman, the real resource of this land is the people. The oil and the gas have served us well, but to get higher value added and actually an economy and a society that is better balanced, the points you make about studying right now how money is being spent, its allocation is critical to free up resources, because in the medium to longer term, inshallah, as SMEs can start to flourish and as MNEs can be attracted here, such as the clusters you talk about, the real money that will come in will be the sensitive and careful application of indirect taxes and probably income tax, and probably the disappearance of things like corporation tax. I don't know if you would comment on that, please.
Yes, so thank you for your comments. That's exactly what I mean by increasing the tax base, right? Or the income base. I would rather tax a little of a lot than a lot of a little, right? And that's our current model right now, is trying to impose the tax on, a specific area, if you may. But let's just think of it from the basic possibility. Let's eliminate all taxes and not think about taxes. Let's just say that the MNEs or SMEs take away 50% of wage bill. We're running a circle, right? So let's think of it from the opportunity to employ people and minimize our wage bill in the short run. And as we increase that, then we can start to think about, if we want to introduce taxation, how does it look? The fear is we introduce taxation too early and too severe that we eliminate business activity in general. And now the government is the sole provider of economic activity. And that's the opposite way of the way we want to go. So I'd rather us see some money, allocate some investment funds to build an infrastructure for businesses to come in. As they grow and they build roots within our economy, then we could talk about how they could pay back to this land and this government and to the population for participating and being part of this economy. So I think we're sharing the same ideas here.
If I may just continue slightly, please.
Sure.
Because I think I am in alignment with your presentation, but I share earlier comments that there's an imperative need now and over the next 18, 24 months for a rigorous interrogation of some of the framework of essentially what are good laws that have been superimposed by directives and practical understandings that don't align effort to commensurate value creation. I don't know if you would comment, please.
That's definitely the first step. The first step is take inventory of what is actually happening. So, you know, another discussion that I usually talk about is evidence-based policymaking and the importance of data in influencing our policies. And that requires us to know what's actually happening right now, and what does the future that we want look like. So we have to forecast it forward. I truly believe that, you know, most of these regulation issues or the spending issues that we're facing, if we think about the customer journey through the Omani economy and we actually follow it, we will see where the bottlenecks are and where the fundings are leaking, if you may, or causing administrative burden. But that requires us to take a step back and go through the process. As I said, I think there's a strong teams working on this right now. I think everybody recognizes the urgency of balancing the budget. And my discussion today is more about, hey, let's, you know, say COVID-19 and the oil crisis are behind us. Where do we go after that? Because there's a lot for us to work on in the next 18 to 24 months, like you said. So thank you for your points.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. Two more questions. Mr. Amr. Mr. Amr?
Yes, yes.
Please go ahead.
I'm trying. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. I think it's an incredibly and very inspiring talk. And thank for Sheikh Khalil for hosting such an interactive platform. My question is related to the evolvement of what they call the gigs economy or the shared economy. Globally, such an economy is driving quite an innovative business. And I think we noticed COVID-19 has brought that strongly in Oman, which is just maybe a couple of months ago, that was not such an acceptable. In my recent work, I came to find out that the millennial and the people who are more pro-shared economy, and it's global, is been trending, especially in places where you've been to, like the US and others. And there's a shift in terms of ownership, in terms of other things, which definitely will enhance the economic model of the way business delivering. However, from my discussion with some of the millennial and some of the executives, there seems still a barrier from accommodating such shared economy by, as people put it, under code of conduct and practices. So knowingly now, especially in Oman, the cultural diversity of Oman, the sum of limitation, be it cultural or being religious for some, especially for the other half of society, which is mostly the gender element of it. So how can the business in Oman actually capitalize on this growth and adjust what it could be in terms of policy or in terms of technology or in terms of implementation to accommodate such a shared economy in driving more sustainable business, be it social or environmental or economical? I would love to see how much you could share with us and your perspective from that, the impact could be of shared economy, and how could Oman capitalize on such moves, especially after we've seen currently, because of COVID-19, it's been already a success. Thank you so much.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on your recent PhD defense. Congratulations, Doctor. You know, your point is well taken. So when I talk about you know, small to medium enterprises, or I talk about small business, that also involves the gig economy. The gig economy is, you know, just one small subset of that. It operates a little bit slightly different, but it's something that should exist in our economy. If somebody wants to use their car to transport something from one part of the city to the next and get paid for it, then why not, right? It's just allocating resources and making them efficient in doing so. The question is, why do we need to get it to regulate it? What are we worried about that could go wrong? And a lot of times, as I said, regulation is introduced because of fear of one thing happening. We penalize the entire industry because we're trying to protect one thing. So sometimes we get too parental in our approach of regulating. I would rather us take a step backwards and say, let's have the gig economy operate. And if something goes bad, then we evaluate it then and see how we could mitigate that issue. But to outlaw or to regulate the entire market it hinders people from taking on new opportunities. So I want to see more liberalization with respect to what jobs people could pick. That also then will start to impact minimum wage laws. It would impact what does it mean to be attached to a business? Do you need to have contracts or not? So I think that's where the issue is usually with regulation. If we relax one thing, then it can have cascading effects on all of these regulations that we've had in the past. And if we take what, like, Mike Hansen said earlier and others have mentioned, if we take inventory of what laws need to exist, then we could start to eliminate the ones that don't need to, and then eliminate any compounding or confounding effects that might happen. But I don't see any reason why gig economy cannot exist in Oman. It's another form of employment, and we should be welcoming majority forms of employment right now. Thank you for your question.
That's exactly, Doctor, what I was referring to. Actually, a lot of corporate, my focus was mostly in the oil and gas, but a lot of corporate, because of the code of conduct, actually prevented those shared economies from taking place within the industry. Because people are still afraid of this, the unknown, or the non-physical aspect of body being registered, following particular financial validity, and so on and so forth. And that has been a barrier from entering the industry, because the industry has a very rigid code of conduct when it comes to financial system. That's what gets a comment. Thank you.
No, thank you. And that's exactly, if you look at my slides between the old economy to the new economy, I suggested that in the old economy, we rewarded stability and minimize risk or certainty. And that usually comes at the expense of innovation. So that is a valid question and something that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Frank Scott.
Abdullah.
Dr. Scott, how are you doing?
Good to see you doing so well. I have one question. Well. Given your success in life, do you have any advice for promising undergraduate business and economics students in Oman who might want to pursue an MBA or a PhD in economics?
Yes, definitely. So for everybody that's watching over here, Dr. Scott was my advisor for my PhD. So it's great to connect with you here. And thank you for taking the time to attend this presentation. We've built a strong investment in higher education in Oman, and for master's and PhD as well. I have benefited greatly from my master's and PhD. I am biased. I like the University of Kentucky, but I think we need, we need more people pursuing those paths. And most importantly, what we need is we need more people with respect to PhDs coming back and continuing their publication records. So one thing that we see in the Middle Eastern market, the Gulf market, is research usually ends with the dissertation. And what we need to see more of is the development of research after. And for that to happen, we need mentorship, strong mentorship. That's why I'm offering today my services as a mentor in advising people, because you cannot follow a path that hasn't existed, and my path didn't exist before me, and I want to pass it on to the next generation of hopefully economists. So I really appreciate you being here. I highly recommend master's and PhD programs for our students. I know some of them are in this talk right now and have been following me, and hopefully this encourages them to pursue those. Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you. Mr. Abdullah Babood, are you still with us? Mr. Abdullah Babood? Mr. Simon?
Yes, did you unmute me?
Yes.
Well, Dr. Abdullah, thank you very much. Usually His Excellency asks me to debrief. What I will do is to go through the 5 pillars of your presentation and give a small comment on each one. In this manner, I would have expressed my view, but at the same time, I've refreshed the memory. On increasing the economic base, we talk about taxes. Just for you to know, we are 312,000 companies registered in Oman. 122,000 are in the Chamber of Commerce. 17,000 in the social security, which means only 17,000 employ one Omani or more, and only 3,000 pay tax. Now, I don't see why we don't apply the law, and whoever is making profit, whether it's a restaurant or a corporation, pays his share of the profit. You talked on the second pillar of redefining higher education. I would have thought that we have to redefine education from beginning to end and after education. We have to probably re-educate the people who are responsible of education, because they don't recognize that we have a problem with education. On the pillar of small enterprises, that they are sine qua non. Either they are there or you cannot be an entrepreneur. And education is not necessary in this case. It's an advantage. But what is necessary is you have to have the need. If you don't feel the need and you have a false security provided either by your government or your parents, you'll never become an entrepreneur. You have to have the passion to be rich, and rich in a legal manner to help others, your parents, and yourself. And you have to love hard work. These are essentials. On the pillar of attracting multinational enterprise, forget it, doctor, forget it. We have 2 problems. We have the major problem, you can't start anything without Omanization. Nothing. And secondly, to talk about trilingual already, with bilingual we have a problem. Anybody who speaks English in the Arab world is not well seen, actually. And finally, on the last one, of course, to go from old economy to new economy and focus on the individual and innovation. Innovation is not a commodity. We don't buy innovation. It's through education, through research that we come to knowledge, then to innovation, then to investigate. These are the 5 pillars I wanted to comment on. Before I finish, I want, somebody asked about hire and fire. We don't, when we speak with the Ministry of Manpower, they say, guys, look, there are 9 instances where you can fire an Omani. They are right. This is when he's drunk or he's hit his boss. But there is no clause for lack of productivity. And what we are saying here, if we adopt this system, whereby you give an Omani a warning for his lack of productivity, then before you fire him, you employ another Omani with the same salary, so don't you don't abuse the system, and for a limited number, and the guy goes into the social protection network with his. It was one of our Tanfiz demands. So there isn't a problem. We can put a mechanism without having a revolution when you take 2-3 Omanis. Actually, the non-productive Omani is in fact taking the place of another Omani who wants to work hard. So, and finally, a personal question. You may want to answer it. You went abroad and you're brilliant. Actually, you are. Why are you not back in Oman and working in Oman? We need you here. And I forgot one, I must say, because it's funny. If we want to engage industry and university, let's start breaking the boundary walls. We don't need boundary walls. You know, the Muscat University does not have a boundary wall. All other universities have boundary walls. MIT doesn't have. Harvard, nobody has a boundary. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah.
There you are.
I appreciate your recap. You did it better than I could have, and I appreciate the extensions. With respect to the one question that you asked, I am at your service. I am available to assist in any way that I can. So I am a product of Oman. I believe in what we have available in Oman, and I cannot ask that we invest in Oman without telling you I am investing as well. So if there's anything that I could assist with, please don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate it.
Hayyak Allah, hayyak Allah.
Yeah.
Hayyak Allah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simon. We have Mr. Mohammed Jafar. Mr. Mohammed Jafar, are you still with us?
Abu Yusuf.
Mr. Haji Adam. Mr. Haji. Mr. Rashad. Mr. Rashad. Mr. Amr Al-Sulaimani. Okay, anyone would like to add any question before we close the session, please? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Abdullah Al Khonji, may I ask you please to close the session?
When is Jaras?
Mr. Abdullah will help us.
Okay. Ramadan Kareem, everyone, and
Hello, Abdullah. Hello.
Ahlan, uncle. And thank you very much for attending. I see some new faces this time around, and I hope and wish for more and more people to join this dialogue, and wish you a very Ramadan Kareem, and thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for your very insightful
thank you for the invitation. I appreciate
presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. See you next week. See you this week, actually. During Ramadan, usually we have one session, but during Ramadan and because of Corona, we will have 3 sessions a week. So please bear with us. I think our next guest will be Helena. She's somewhere around here. Helena, I send you the invitation. You haven't seen it yet. So hopefully she will be our next guest Tuesday at 9 p.m. Thank you and good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Shukran, Sa'adak.
Shukran. ما في سمبوسة.
Thank you so much.
لا لا لا.
Thank you.
We're sitting alone here, guys.
Virtual. حتى التخشيم virtual.
Virtual سمبوسة إن شاء الله.
عندنا البحرين وعندنا الدوحة وعندنا روم and USA. I don't know how many countries today we have. Yeah. مع السلامة. يلا.
سلامتك حسن.
مع السلامة. مع السلامة. مع السلامة. مع السلامة جميعا.